I'm Jim Howard, and 78 was my first Western States, and that's when I met Doug. Um, so it's a pleasure to be here today to talk about the 1981 tie.
Jim, I'd be interested to know, because running 100 miles on a trail through wild country, a very rough trail with 23,000 feet of climbing and 17,000 feet of descent is not something most people do. How did you get started in running, and what led you to enter Western States to become a distance runner?
Um, I've been running since high school, cross country and track, and then college, cross country and track, and then progressed to road races and marathons. And I did a 50K, um, and it just led to trail running and running longer. And when I heard about Western States, it was just starting to grab hold. I heard about the 77 race where they had, I think, 14 participants, and it intrigued me. Um, Running in the mountains, I didn't know the course, I didn't know what I was getting into, but it sounded very interesting and challenging. Um, so that's kind of what drew me to the 1978 race.
Yeah.
What what drew you to it?
I didn't start running until I was 37. And that happened because I had a friend, a very good friend, my best friend, who was a runner, and he came he worked in the same company. He came into my office one morning and said, Doug, I just ran a 10K and I ran 6-minute miles. And stupidly, I said, well, Jim, I haven't run since I was in college in workouts, and I could run a 6-minute mile right now, and it's been 20 years ago. And he said, no, you can't. And I said, yes, I can. So I went out to his house on the weekend. There was a track near where he was, and I went out in tennis shoes and long pants, and I ran a 6-minute mile. So he said, Doug, you gotta be a runner. So I started, and I heard about Western States one day. I was working at the time. I'd moved out from New York, was working for Runner's World magazine, and a very good friend there, who was the director of advertising, came running into my office one day and said, Doug, I have the proofs for the new issue of Runner's World. Look at this. And he opened it up to a 2-page spread that showed the first time that runners officially ran with the Tevis Cup ride. And it was this dramatic photo of runners and horses together, dust plumes going up, and they're running up a lava ridge like this. And he said, we've got to do this. And I said, well, I don't really think that I could do something like that. It sounds exciting. And he didn't say anything else. And 3 days later, he came in and said, Doug, I signed us both up. So I had no choice. And it turned out to be a wonderful experience.
No.
And I remember the 78 race when we met vividly. I remember all the races vividly, but 78 was unique because there were a lot more runners. There were some very good runners there for the first time. It was an incredibly heavy snow year. It was like running the first 30 or 40 miles were like running in Antarctica. It was deep, deep snow. There were cornices and crevices. Um, and what I particularly remember is that all of us in our little lead group, we got to the top of Emigrant, and we all took the wrong course. except there was one runner behind us who knew what the right course was, and he didn't tell us. He let us all go off the wrong way, and he took the lead, and then eventually we all caught him and passed him. But it was very dramatic because of the snow.
I
Um,
I do remember that because when we crested over the monument and then we got down on the saddle there, and I remember running right next to Andy Gonzalez, and Andy started heading down um, too low on the trail,
mm-hmm.
which was a mistake. But um, with the snow, it was hard to tell where the trail was, and so we didn't go too far off, but it took a couple minutes to figure it
Yeah.
out, well, which direction to go.
Yeah. Well, that race was very different. Today, I think there are something like, I'm not sure exactly, but 18 checkpoints where you can stop and get something to drink or eat. And I think we had about, I don't know, 6 or maybe 8. And the first checkpoint was at Red Star Ridge. And in the deep snow, the checkpoint consisted of one person. I think he was then 70 years old, Wendell Roby, the founder of the Tevis Cup Ride, who permitted the Western States Run to begin. And he had come out in a snowmobile and was standing in snow practically up to his ears with one bucket of water and a ladle. And that was the checkpoint. Today, you can practically get Mai Tais at the checkpoint if you want. And he said, "Oh, Latimer, good to see you. And you want a ladle?" And I said, "Sure." And I took the ladle and I drank it. And I said, "Can I have another?" And he said, "Nope, ain't got enough water. One ladle per runner." And that was the checkpoint. But you took the lead in that race, and then some bad things happened, as I recall.
I um, I remember taking the lead. Um, the Back then, when you leave Robinson, you run down what's called Kavanaugh Ridge. Um, and then the Kavanaugh Ridge is very rocky, and then it drops down onto some nice road, which is called Deep Canyon 1 and Deep Canyon 2. Kind of misleading because I didn't know the course. And so I'm running on the Deep Canyon 1, Deep Canyon 2 road, and I'm kind of didn't didn't know the course, so I picked up the pace because it just felt easy. Um, I got into Last Chance in the lead, left Last Chance, and then I ventured into what the real canyons are. And I, in the canyons, I lost the lead to Andy, and it's because I had no idea they were that steep and deep. And so, yeah, a wide opening experience, eye-opening experience.
Yeah. Well, none of us knew anything about running 100 miles. None of us knew anything about the trail. I almost got lost once. One of the nice things about Western States runners I found over the years is that they're really good people. And I was not quite at the Red Star Ridge checkpoint yet, where Wendell Roby was waiting with his bucket, which is the 16 or 17 mile mark in the course. And I was in an impenetrable forest in deep snowdrifts. I had no idea where I was or where I should be going because the trail was covered in deep snow. And I stood there, and then from way in the distance ahead of me, I heard a voice calling, "Doug, Doug." And I said, "What?" And he told me who it was. It was a runner I knew. He said, "Come this way, come this way. The trail's this way." So I eventually got, on the right trail. But I eventually finished fifth, um, walking almost the entire last half of the course because my muscles were so just torn to shreds from all the descent and the climbs. And you dropped out, didn't drop out, you dropped out of the race temporarily for a long time.
At at Michigan Bluff, I spent 3 hours,
50 mile.
and the discussion was, well, he's dropping, and I after 3 hours, I got up and I decided, well, I'll just walk out of here and see, and I started walking. And so, yeah, for a while, the rumors had it that I dropped, but I kept moving, and so I did finish, um, and I looked at the results, and I didn't realize, anyway, I was just like 4 or 5 minutes behind you when you were fifth. I was sixth in the 1978 race, and but it was so the 78 race was when we first met, and it was an eye opener to me, and so that kind of spurred on. Well, I can do better. I can. So and then um, the idea was, well, let's train properly for this and see what we can do. So
Well, it's been an interesting time, and I certainly had no idea that almost 40 years later we'd be sitting here in front of a video camera talking about it. But it's been a wonderful experience. And um, should we talk a bit about our tie? I have found there's been quite a well, actually a lot of interest among runners as to why we tied. I've had a lot of people ask about it. Um, it's never happened again since then, and I think it probably never will happen because the circumstances were so unique. And we had gotten to know each other a lot better over the years. We'd done some training runs together. We'd seen each other in races. We had both led the race uh, at least 3 or 4 different years, and it always had something go wrong, which we'd commiserated about. And what I remember is starting out is up at Squaw Valley before the race, after the briefing in the afternoon, that you and I got together at some point, and we talked about our past almost successes that turned into failures. And we both decided we had gone out too fast and that we should run more rationally early. Um, and that was our strategy, and you can fill in.
so in 1981, after quite a few years of going out too fast, learning the hard way that um, pace, if it's too fast too soon, will catch up to you. And seems simple, but you get excited and you go and you get out there and you just go. Anyway, but so the 1981 race is a race that for both of us that um, at the monument we're together.
The monument at the top of the
At
first
the,
climb, yeah.
correct, at
Hmm.
4 miles,
Hmm.
and I'm pretty sure we were in 34th and 35th place, right in there. And you looked
Whereas
at me,
usually we were in the lead, or
correct.
the lead
Instead
group.
of going for the lead,
Yeah.
uh, we're both hanging back. And by hanging back, we're not drastic amount of time, but enough positions to where we're going out comfortably. And you looked at me and said, "Well, what are you doing back here?" And I looked at you and, "Well, what are you doing back here?" And we have both learned our mistakes of going out too fast. So, and in that same kind of brief conversation, um, going over the monument at 4 miles, uh, we, I, I, I think it was you. I think, well, have a good day. Maybe we'll tie.
Hmm.
Okay. And
Jokingly.
and so that kind of uh, put a thought in our head of, okay, we'll have a good day. And well, the day progressed, and we were no more than 2 minutes apart. And a lot of times we were together running, so it felt very comfortable. It felt like I was part of a team.
Yeah.
So, um,
Yeah. But I remember, well, I remember a lot of it, but I particularly remember because after we crossed Immigrant in roughly 33rd or 44th place, which was unusual for us, we didn't really know where we were in the race. We would pass some runners, maybe a couple of guys would pass us, and it was very hard to tell. And we finally, as we approached the checkpoint at Robinson Flat, which is the 30-mile mark in the course, some spectators always come a bit down from the checkpoint into the canyon we were coming up out of, and there were some people standing beside the trail. And either you or I can't remember which, turned to a guy and said, "Do you know what position we're in and how far behind we are?" And he said, "You're in 8th and 9th place, and the leaders are only a few minutes ahead." And you got a big smile on your face, and you turn and you slap me on the back and said, "We're in it, Doug, we're right in it." And after that, the other thing I remember is as we got out of Robinson Flat and we're heading down toward Dusty Corners, which is about 44 miles, that we were running along and we saw a runner ahead of us who I recognized. He was New Zealand's best Masters runner, 40 years or older. And he had been ahead of us, and he had stopped on the trail to drink from a waterfall that was coming over a cliff by the side of the road. And I don't remember his name now, but I said, Jim, look, that's so-and-so. We're going to pass him." And you turned to me and said, "Doug, of course we're going to pass him. He's an old man. He can't run." And I looked at Jim and I said, "Jim, I'm older than he is." And you apologized for about the next 10 miles.
Yeah.
But that was neat. And then as we were approaching Last Chance, which is a nice flat dirt road, I could tell you were feeling a little more sprightly than I was. And I said, "Jim, go ahead. I can tell you want to go faster." And you said, "No, let's run together." And I said, No, don't wait for an old man. Go ahead and run." So you took off and disappeared. Your turn.
So I remember the day unfolded. We ran a lot together. We had lots of little conversations, and we were running through Forest Hill, and we're next to each other. And the conversation went something like, "Well, I think we've got."
Can I backtrack just a little?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Um, we I passed you going down into Diablo Canyon. You were stopped briefly, I think, attending to a brief call of nature by the side of the road or the trail. And by the time we got to the bottom of the canyon, I had taken the lead. And as we went up the canyon to Devil's Thumb, the trail is a switchback, and I could look back, and you were wearing either a yellow or a red shirt, I forget, but I could see you about maybe 50 yards behind, right behind me. And my instinct was, someone right behind me, I think it's Jim. I better run faster. And I said, no, I'm not going to run faster. Our whole strategy is just take it easy in the beginning. And it went that way all the way up and then down into the next canyon. I could look behind and see you were right behind me. I didn't want to stop because then others might catch up to us, but I didn't. I expected you to catch up. And then you caught up just as we left Forest Hill. And I could look over my shoulder and see you 50 feet behind me running along the road there, in that brief spot on the road.
So running through Forest Hill, I remember we're running together, and the conversation went something like, "Well, we're both having a good day. Maybe we should talk serious about tying."
Yeah. You asked me
And,
how I felt. And I said, I feel really good. And I said, how do you feel? And you said, you feel really good. And you said, do you think you can keep this pace up all the way to the finish? And I said, yeah, I really think so. And you said, I think I can too. And then you said, how would you feel about tying? Um,
and so I remember leaving Forest Hill, and we're running together, and we said, "Okay, we'll touch base again. We'll talk about it." Uh, and I don't know if we mentioned Highway 49 or we just meant we'll talk later in
we'll
the race
decide
about.
later. Yeah.
Um, and the race continued the same way, where we're no more than 2 minutes apart, going back and forth because of the aid stations or the nature calls. And I do remember at Auburn Lake Trails, I left Auburn Lake Trails ahead of you, and I was running, and I'm going, well, I know he's right there, so it's and and we got down low at, after so many miles. I got down low on the next to the river, and I'm getting close to the climb up to Highway 49, and I'm going, well, I'm kind of hot, so I know he's close by, you know, and the talk about tying, I I was gung ho for tying because it just felt right. Um, and I did get reports from my crew that we were moving away from the rest of the field. And anyway, so I took oh, maybe 30, 45 seconds to go briefly down to in the river and splash water on and then come back up to the trail, knowing that okay, that would take up and by that time you should be there. Sure enough, you were there, and I'm going okay. And I think on the climb up to 49 is when we finally
Yeah.
cinched
Hmm.
our the
Yeah.
the agreement
Yeah.
to tie.
I'd like to backtrack briefly again because uh, running along that brief paved road coming out of Forest Hill before we dropped into White Oak Flat and then down into the River Canyon. When you asked about tying, um, I hadn't expected that. I mean, we were joking about it when we were climbing up out of Immigrant. We were in 33rd place, but so I didn't have it on my mind. And I thought to myself, well, I really want to win it, and normally I would go for it. But then I thought, if Jim and I have had the same experiences in the last 3 years of almost winning it, but not. And if I beat Jim by a minute or two, because it would have been very close, I think, um, I'll be happy to win, but I'll feel terrible about Jim. And conversely, if I lose to Jim by a couple of minutes, I'm going to feel awful because I had to be carried off the course with a huge lead the year before, and I'd been passed with only 4 miles to go. The year before that came in second. And I just couldn't bear the thought of losing again or not winning. So at that point, I thought to myself, Jim is probably the nicest person I've ever met in my life, and probably the best runner. You've had some amazing runs, and I thought it would be an honor. So I was very happy about it, and I still am. And one thought, well, also leaving Highway 49, you seemed a little tired. And at one point, I thought maybe someone was going to catch us. So I said, do you mind if I take the lead? Because you were leading, and we just go a little faster. You said, sure. And then later, I was feeling a little tired, and you took the lead. And one question I've had is, how much faster could we have gone if we were racing each other? Because we did 16:02. It would have been so nice to do 15 something, and we certainly could have done 15 something.
So I think the agreement to tie kind of took a lot of pressure off and kind of we backed off the pace a little bit. So where
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think we would have been under 16 if
Oh, certainly. That's only two
yeah.
minutes. You know.
But one thing to mention is that um, we had pacers. So I think Ed Wehan,
Yeah, William was my pacer. Yeah.
yes, and Chris Turney was my
It's
pacer.
yours.
And so four of us are going along from 49 in to the finish. So it really felt like a team. And there's no pressure because of the agreement. Um, and I felt the same way with my thoughts with I do want to win. There's no way I'm not going to win. I am going to win. And I felt the sadness if I took the win and only won and not shared it. And so I just, like, it's a win-win situation where if we tie. It's and it was our crews didn't quite see it that
No,
way.
our crews were very, very
So
unhappy.
I remember at a couple checkpoints, they would go, "Oh, you can get him, you can get him." I go, "Dad, we're running together, we're fine." And then at 49, when we finally said, "Okay, we are going in together," it was still the crews going, "No, you can get him." So it was like, all right,
Yeah.
my crew.
My crew was saying, he's exhausted, he's dehydrated, you can take him, you can take him. And I said, no, we're not going to do that.
Yeah.